ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेष्वभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीर्वुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवती नैष्टिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय गोविन्दाय नमो नमः। ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तां सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनासहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपदान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण। Before we proceed ahead, yesterday's class, if there are any questions or comments, then we'll go ahead. So we discussed till the yeah, question. Okay. We discussed till the 40th verse yesterday. 40th verse we have to begin. So the Vena's cruel activities are described in few verses. 40th verse. Recite. Sasharasanamudhyamya Mrugayurvanagocharaha Hantya Sadur Mrugan Dinan Venosav ityaraujanah. Somebody can.
After fixing his bow and or arrow, the cruel boy used to go to the forest and unnecessarily kill innocent deer. And as soon as he came, all the people would cry, "Here comes cruel Vena! Here comes cruel Vena!"
So we see that Vena's consciousness was, he had the mindset of a paradukka sukhi. He would take pleasure in actually giving trouble to the people. And the people were so afraid of Vena that wherever Vena would go, people, like out of fear, they would start actually shouting that, "Oh, here comes Vena." So this is a very perverted nature of the living entity in seeking pleasure that can be seen in Vena actually. That like yesterday we discussed about that dictator who take pleasure in killing the person who put his complete trust in him, and to see the emotions in that person was the greatest pleasure of Stalin. So taking a very perverted pleasure in killing the trusted people. Akride kridato balan vayasyan ati darunah prasahya niranukrosha pashumaram amarayat. So ati darunah niranukrosha. Akride kridatah vayasyan balan prasahya pashumaram amarayat. So ati darunah, he was very cruel, and niranukrosha means merciless. And akride kridato, he would actually very violently kill his friends as a matter of play, actually. As a matter of play. And pashumaram amarayat. Like he considered the small children to be like animals to be slaughtered. So generally we have heard that small children breaking the toys. But here, when as a child would play, he would kill other children. This is a very extreme way of, he exhibited, many times we would see that even if somebody has a cruel mindset, usually that gets manifest after some years. Still, we would see some innocence in the childhood of the people. Generally, we would see innocence in the childhood. And then after some years, then certain wrong mindset would manifest. Yesterday, I was talking with one devotee, like he was just speaking with great concern. His son is studying in only 5th standard, but he said that somehow he got some bad association, and he was searching and looking for something very unmentionable things in the internet. So he said, I don't know how he got this information about these things. Why is he looking for these things? Why is he searching for this? Said we are highly disturbed by seeing the son just studying in 5th standard, and that too not in some metro cities or something, some taluka place like that. So we can see how the Maya is so powerful that as the technology has advanced, like everything, there are so many books are available just in the tip of a mobile phone. Previously, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would bring some book from some place, there was a devotee called as Vijaya Dasa. He would personally copy the books for Mahaprabhu. So Mahaprabhu named him as Ratna Bahu, the devotee with a jewel handed. So whenever Mahaprabhu would bring some book, all the devotees would be so eager to read that book, but and they would have to personally hand copy that book, actually wait for people to hand copy that book. So everything, previously maybe devotees had great eagerness, but the books were not available easily. So now everything is available. All the spiritual literatures, so many things are available in the fingertips. At the same time, one can go into the deepest forms of illusion that is also available in the fingertip, at the tip of the fingertips, actually. So sometimes it's a very peculiar thing. Like sometimes in the case of Vena, that even as a small child he exhibited a very cruel nature. So then Anga Maharaj, he wanted to correct, and he made great efforts. He put great efforts. Tam vichakshya kalam putram shasanair vividair nripaha yada na shasitum kalpa brisham asit sudurmana. So shasanair vividair. He made several attempts. He devised several means to correct his son, but na shasitum kalpa, but he was unable to correct. Therefore, asid durmana, he became greatly depressed. So there is one difference between Anga Maharaj and Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra was advised by several people to correct his son, but he never put physical effort to correct his son. But Anga Maharaj, he put efforts to correct his son, and then after all the attempts failed, then he developed a philosophical disposition in his mind. But Dhritarashtra, without putting the efforts, he actually he would try to speak a philosophy that not even a blade of grass moves without the will of the Lord. So when it is time to actually put action, one should put action, and when it is supposed to, when there is time to withdraw action and simply develop a philosophical disposition, at that time one should try to develop a philosophical disposition. Many times when we are supposed to put our purusha prayatna, purushartha, a conditioned soul is reluctant to put the purushartha. And when we are supposed to withdraw our purushartha, simply develop a philosophical disposition, at that time we try to put our purushartha. Dhritarashtra's destiny was not to become the king. His sons were not supposed to become the king, but he was putting the purushartha in the wrong direction. And when the people were advising to put his purushartha to correct his son, at that time he was actually reluctant to put his purushartha. So then Anga Maharaj says that, we'll recite together 44th verse. Yata papiyasi kirtir adharmascha mahan nrinam yato virodas sarvesham yata adir anantakah. And read translation.
A sinful son causes a person's reputation to vanish. His irreligious activities at home cause irreligion and quarrel among everyone, and this creates only endless anxiety.
So in the two verses, Anga Maharaj is reflecting upon the result of having a bad son. Yata papiyasi kirtir, one gets a sinful reputation. And adharmascha, and it is a sign of great adharma. Adharmascha, mahan adharma. And yato viroda, there will be quarrel among, he will create quarrel among the people. And yata adir anantakaha, there will be endless anxiety. In the next two verses, he says that sinful son is a cause of bondage and illusion, and the house becomes full of suffering. In the Hitopadesha, Narayana Bhatta mentions, he says that Ajata Mrita Murkanam Varam Adyau na Chantimaha Sakrid Dukkha Karavadya Vanti Mastu Pade Pade. So Ajata, unborn or Mrita, dead sons, are preferable to foolish sons. Because the first two, that is unborn sons and the dead sons, they give misery only once. But a foolish son gives misery at every step throughout your life. Unless the son is rejected, actually. So, like there are several verses which talk about the son. Once birth is successful, if the son brings honor to his dynasty. Otherwise, one is born and dies uselessly in this changing world. So, it's especially for a person who is a religious devotee, and when he gets a bad son, it creates such an embarrassment for him, his family. Sulnas Radhanath Maharaj would always mention that, like we see in the Bhagavatam, there are several stories in relation to having a son or losing a son. Several instances we find in the Bhagavatam. Like Chitraketu Maharaj was miserable because of not having a son. He was expecting a son. He thought that, oh, in this marriage I will get a son, or in this marriage I will get a son. Like that he was expecting, but he didn't get a son at all. And because of that, he was highly miserable. And Hiranyakashipu, he was expecting a demoniac son who will carry forward his legacy. And he was miserable when he saw when Prahlad Maharaj was born, who had such divine qualities. Anga Maharaj was expecting a dharmic son who would actually take forward the dynasty, the values of Dhruva Maharaj and others. But he got a demoniac son. So Anga Maharaj and Hiranyakashipu, they would be happy, they would have been happy to exchange their sons. But material world is, because they were there in different times of the year, different times. But so the material world is such a place that misery you don't get according to your expectation. So at that time, how do we actually react to the situation when the expectation does not, the reality does not match with one's expectation? So how do we deal with that? So that is why Krishna speaks about the Nishkama Karma Yoga. Nishkama Karma Yoga has got actually four aspects. Nishkama Karma Yoga has got four aspects practicing Nishkama Karma Yoga. The first aspect is that Kartavya Viveka. That means, okay, I need to perform this duty. This is one Gita commentator I heard. Kartavya Viveka, yes, just based on this verse only, if you read this 2.4, Karmanyeva Adhikarasya Ma Phaleshu Kadachana Ma Karma Phala Heturur Mate Sangasa Karma. Just based on that verse, Kartavya Viveka, I need to perform this duty. That's the first aspect of Nishkama Karma Yoga. And then the second aspect is Phala Aphala Sama. Like one should have an equal disposition whether you get the right result or whether you get the unexpected result or whether you don't get the result. Krishna says that Sukhe Dukhe Same Kritva Labha Labho Jaya Jaya. The third aspect is that Krishna Arpana Buddhi. Whatever result you get, you offer to Krishna. And then the fourth aspect is Prasada Svikara. After offering to Krishna, then you accept the result. That is like accepting as a mercy of Krishna. So these are the four aspects of Nishkam Karma Yoga. So the reason why one becomes miserable is that because Nishkam Karma Yoga is not practiced. So Anga Maharaj is reflecting that, oh, the result of having a bad son. And then he says,
Bhagavatam, sorry, there is an example of Rudrasur who fought, he knew, or we see there is an example of Jatayu who were very less powerful compared to Ravana. They fought. So, but in our case, there is also an example, Duryodhan, his father Dhritarashtra, and he was told abandon this son because he's not worthy of maintaining, but he didn't abandon. So, like certain places, you know, there are going to be no fruit of doing one's duty. In what case one continues to still do the duty, in what case actually one should abandon doing one's duty because there's not going to be fruit. And specifically when we are dealing in a service like preaching and all, then the fruit is always, we also consider that our no, because there's a limited time, energy in every way. So we also consider that are the fruits going to come in that direction, or no, we should do something else or some other way.
like abandoning the duty. So there are different duties actually. It's like suppose certain duties, when the right time comes, one may have to abandon the duties sometimes. But Nishkam Karma Yoga is especially with respect to Varnashram duties, this principle. In the case of devotional service, Anya Bilashita Shunyam Jnana Karmadi Anavritam. So that principle is followed with respect to devotional service, the Bhakti Yoga. Nishkama Karma Yoga is especially towards one's Varnashram duties. Because in preaching also, one is supposed to, one should try to put one's enthusiasm to preach, although many times people may not respond in the same way according to our expectation. So Nishkam Karma Yoga helps us to, attitude of Nishkam Karma Yoga helps us to continue preaching. And sometimes if the result is not coming, say for example in preaching, then one may have to choose here some other situation which may be more conducive for preaching. Chaitanya Charitamrita, when Mahaprabhu started his South Indian tour, Kaviraj Goswami describes that how Mahaprabhu was preaching in South India. He would go to one village, different people will become devotees. Then they would go to other villages and they would make devotees. So in that purport, Prabhupada says that when Mahaprabhu was present in Bengal, many people were smarta brahmanas. They were not accepting Mahaprabhu's message. The situation, they were not ready to accept Mahaprabhu's message easily. So then Mahaprabhu chose the place which will be more conducive for his preaching. Therefore, he started going in South India. So there Prabhupada explains that similarly, we also tried to preach in India, but the situation was not favorable. Then we went to the West and started preaching. So that aspect is there. We have to have the attitude of Nishkam Karma Yoga in preaching. But at the same time, when we put our repeated thoughtful effort, when we put our effort after thinking, when we put our full effort after proper deliberation, still if the result is not coming repeatedly, then one may choose a place which will be more conducive for preaching. So like that.
Yes.
So abandoning the sense, there is no abandoning. It is basically like changing the direction of our effort. It's not abandoning the service means maybe we stop putting effort in that particular place. We may put effort in some other place.
Like I give example of Duryodhan. Dhritarashtra was told abandon this and actually give up, but he continued to maintain him. So in that case, he should have given it up, right?
Yes. Yeah, Dhritarashtra was given that advice right at the birth of Duryodhana and also later also. So they told that this one particular son, if you maintain him, he'll be the cause of the destruction of the entire dynasty. But like sometimes people ask like, how can any parents abandon their son? It's a very cruel advice. But because we think in terms of only from the role of a parent, but Dhritarashtra was not simply playing the role of a parent, but he had a much bigger role as a king. So because Dhritarashtra was blinded by his attachments, therefore Dhritarashtra represents a person who had knowledge, but who never had the courage to implement that knowledge. So because of the attachment, he couldn't implement that knowledge. Because Dhritarashtra was born from Vyasadeva and Ambika. Because he is the son of the Vyasadeva himself, therefore he had access to the knowledge. He had knowledge. But what was Ambika's mindset at the time of the Dhritarashtra's birth? When Ambika saw Dhritarashtra, she was very reluctant. She was not welcoming. Like when she saw Vyasadeva, like she was very reluctant. She was not welcoming Vyasadeva. So that mood of reluctance was there in Ambika. And Vyasadeva, he had the access to the whole Vedic knowledge. Therefore, when Dhritarashtra was born, Dhritarashtra had the combination of both. He had all the knowledge, but he had the reluctance to implement that knowledge. So Ambika represents the living entity. Vyasadeva is the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Vyasadeva's semen is like the Vishnu Prasad. Even when the living entity gets the Vishnu Prasad, but if the living entity is reluctant to accept that Vishnu Prasad, then it will not produce the desired transformation. It will not produce the desired result. So therefore, two things are required. Dhritarashtra never had that courage to implement that knowledge.
And probably this prasad, what you mentioned, which can be the fourth thing. So is it internal satisfaction after offering results to the fruits of Lord?
Is it lead to?
Is it an internal satisfaction one feels? That is what is main. The fourth thing, what is prasad?
Accepting the offering to Krishna and then accepting that as a prasadam. Offering to Krishna and then you accept the result as a mercy of Krishna.
Result means
whatever result comes, you offer it to Krishna and then accept that as a mercy of Krishna.
Okay.
So then Anga Maharaj says that, like, which intelligent person would value a son in name only, who is the cause of one's bondage and illusion, and because of whom the house is full of suffering? There's a shloka in the Bhartrihari's Niti Shataka. Yaha prinayet sucharitai pitaram sa putro. He alone is fit to be called a son who pleases his father by his good behavior. And she alone is worthy of being called a wife who always wishes good for her husband. yad bartureva hitam icchati tat kalatram. And he alone is fit to be called a friend who behaves alike in affliction and prosperity. Tan mitram apadi sukecha samakriyam yad. So, etat trayam jagati punya kruto labante. One who gets blessed with the above three, a good son, a good wife, and a good friend, having these above qualities, such a person is considered to be highly pious. Punya kruto labante. So now the last section talks about the Anga Maharaja's positive attitude, which is a very important shloka, 46th verse. Kadapatyam varam manye savadapatyat shucham padat nirvidyeta grihan martyo yatklesha nivaha griha. Read translation.
Then the king thought, a bad son is better than a good son, because a good son creates an attachment for home, whereas a bad son does not. A bad son creates a hellish home from which an intelligent man naturally becomes very easily detached.
So this is this is the highlight of the whole story. Like how Anga Maharaj is seeing such a negative situation as in a very positive way, considering that as a great opportunity to get detached from his family, kingdom, etc. So, like Anga Maharaj develops a very deep sense of detachment. Like when we talk about like prasad is not just the physical food items which we offer to Krishna and then we take it as prasadam. But prasad is also prasad can also be should also be seen in the situations of our life. Actually, like when different difficult situations come in our life, suppose if we are having the thought that why is it happening to me, or how can such a thing happen to me, how can such a difficult situation happen to such a pious person like me, or why I have not done any mistake. So when we are having that kind of mindset, that means that mindset is nothing but the mindset of enjoying the bhoga, wanting to enjoy the bhoga before offering to Krishna. But even when a difficult situation comes, which cannot be changed, but when we take the situation as oh, this is an opportunity for me to come close to Krishna, how I can actually come close to Krishna even in this situation. If a person is seeing like that, that means he is actually seeing the situation as the mercy of the Lord. Therefore, the bhoga and prasadam, it is not only in terms of the physical food item, but it is also with respect to the different situations in our life. The enjoyment tendency and seeing the situation as a mercy of the Lord, that depends on what mindset we have in the different situations. So here, it is not about this verse. Anga Maharaj says that a bad son is better than a good son. So it is not literally we have to take this verse. What we have to see is that we have to see the Anga Maharaj's positive attitude. So even when a person gets a good son, one should see that as a positive, with a positive attitude, that with a grateful attitude, one should thank Krishna. And even when a person gets a bad situation, one should thank Krishna. And that attitude is supposed to be learned. Like Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, he mentioned that if I lived in good health for another 30 years, the last stage of life he mentioned, if I lived in good health for another 30 years, in that 30 years, I could not do the quantitative and qualitative service that I am doing for the Vaishnava community as I am being allowed to do in the last 6 months on my deathbed. I could not affect people's hearts in the 30 years the way I have done in the last 6 months. Therefore, I consider this cancer to be the great benediction in my life, because it is providing me the opportunity to do greater service to the devotees. So therefore, like Radhanath Maharaj mentioned, that we must learn to be translators in our life. A translator's role is that he is supposed to understand the language of the person who is speaking, and then he is supposed to convey that message in another language to his audience. So two roles are there for a translator. So the acharyas also play the role of a translator in one sense. Acharyas, they understand the verses spoken by the Lord and the devotees in the direct scriptures, and then they try to convey that same message in a way we can understand. So the translator, first thing is that he has to understand the message in the original language. So Maharaj mentioned that we must learn to be translators. We must learn to translate whatever happens in our life into a positive opportunity to surrender to Krishna. And factually, it is not just something theoretical or imaginary. Literally, every possibility is there. It is an opportunity to make spiritual advancement and to come close to Krishna. So therefore, this is what we can learn from Anga Maharaj's attitude. And Anga Maharaj, he did not simply develop some temporary vairagya. There are three types of temporary vairagya: smashan vairagya, the vairagya in the smashan bhumi, or abhava vairagya. Sometimes a person develops detachment when he is unable to achieve some things. Abhava vairagya, morality is lack of opportunity. And when somebody is not able to obtain the certain opportunity or success, at that time a person speaks certain moral principles. Or the fox who was trying to attain the grapes, the fox, when he was not able to get the grapes, he said that all the grapes are sour. So abhava vairagya is also a temporary vairagya. Once a person gets the opportunity to enjoy, then the vairagya will go away. Or prasava vairagya during the difficulties, at that time a person may develop a sense of detachment. But once the difficulties go away, that vairagya will also disappear. So Anga Maharaja did not develop such kind of a temporary vairagya. He developed a deep sense of detachment. Like we see in the Bhagavatam, several examples, like we see in the example of Pingala. When Pingala couldn't get any customers throughout the night, then she developed a deep sense of detachment. The deep sense of detachment, and which leads to bhakti, that can happen only by certain mercy of the Lord or the devotees. So Pingala said that although I most stubbornly hope to enjoy the material world, somehow or other detachment has arisen in my heart and it is making me very happy. Therefore, I feel that the Supreme Lord must be very pleased with me. And without even knowing it, I must have performed some activity satisfying to Krishna, that therefore this deep sense of detachment has arisen in my heart. And then Avadut Brahmana also, when he was ridiculed by all the people, when he was rejected by everyone, That time he says that Noonam me Bhagavam Stushta Sarva Deva Mayo Harihi Yena Nito Dasham Etam Nirvedas Chatmana Plavaha. He says the Supreme Lord who contains within himself all the Devatas must be satisfied with me. Just like Pingala was saying. Indeed, he has brought me to the suffering condition and he has forced me to experience a detachment, which is the boat to carry me over this ocean of material life. And similar words were spoken by Mahaprabhu to Sanatan Goswami. When Sanatan Goswami came to meet Mahaprabhu, after going through those, escaping from the jail, and Sanatan Goswami met Mahaprabhu, Mahaprabhu said that, Yeta kahi kahe Prabhu shuna Sanatana, Krishna bada dayamaya patita pavana. Krishna is very merciful and he is the deliverer of all the fallen souls. Maharaurava heite toma karila uddara. Krishna has saved you from Maharaurava and he is an ocean of mercy. And Kripara Samudra Krishna Gambhira Apara. His activities are very grave. Essentially, Mahaprabhu is saying that by Krishna's mercy, although you are intimately in touch with the Muslims and the different opulences, but you actually found that association to be distasteful. So that is the mercy of Krishna. And therefore you have actually come here. So similarly, Anga Maharaj has developed a deep sense of detachment. Next verse he says, Evam sa nirvinna manan rupo grahan Nishita vuttaya mahodayadayat Alabda nidro nupalakshito nrabir Hitva gato vena suvam prasuptam.
Thinking like that, King Anga could not sleep at night. He became completely indifferent to household life. Once, therefore, in the dead of night, he got up from bed and left Vena's mother, this wife, who was sleeping deeply. He gave up all attraction for his greatly opulent kingdom, and unseen by anyone, he very silently gave up his home and opulence and proceeded toward the forest.
So Nirvinnamana, filled with disgust, and the sleepless king, Alabda Nidro, he got up and unseen by others, Anupalakshito Nribir, Anupalakshita, and Hitva Gato Vena Subam, he gave up his sleeping wife. Vena Subam refers to like Sunita. And Mahodaya Dayat. Mahodaya Dayat is an important word. Mahodaya Dayat means the house which is filled with great wealth. Previously, you remember in the Uttanupad's renunciation, there is a great description of the opulence of the Uttanupad's kingdom. The 9th chapter. So they were all very highly powerful, opulent kings. But he gave up that opulent house in the dead of the night. So Prabhupada says that Mahodaya Dayat indicates that by the blessings of a great soul, one becomes materially opulent. But when one gives up attachment to material wealth, that should be considered an even greater blessing from the great souls. But so Anga Maharaj, all this shows that Anga Maharaj had great blessings of the Lord and the devotees. So we see that especially when we talk about the blessings in the form of the spiritual blessings, the power of the blessings is that that which is ordinarily impossible, that becomes possible. So ordinarily, it is impossible to give up such an opulent kingdom. But by the power of the blessings, it becomes possible. Like there are other places Prabhupada talks about the power of the blessings. Ordinarily, it is practically impossible to develop detachment without going through the experience of Grihastha ashram. But Prabhupada says in a purport that, but by the blessings of a great soul like Narada Muni, Haryashvas got the realization without going through the Grihastha ashram. And ordinarily, the blessing, ordinarily, for a person to be ruling a kingdom, to be dealing with material energy, being surrounded by opulence, at the same time being detached within, ordinarily it is very difficult. But Prabhupada, but it is described in the Priyavrat Maharaj section. Brahma is saying that, because Priyavrata is saying that if I become the king, I may become, I will forget all the principles of detachment, I may get carried away. But Brahma says that, don't worry, by my blessings, although you will become the king, although you will be surrounded by the different opulences, your love for the Lord will only increase. So blessings actually makes the impossible into possible. So Anga Maharaj, so therefore one definition of bhakti is that bhakti is the art of transforming curses into blessings. So Anga Maharaj, he actually, by the right disposition, he considered the situation which was like a curse. He saw that situation as a blessing to take shelter of the Lord. So then, when the Anga Maharaj left, all the citizens, priests, and friends, ministers understood that the king had left in disgust, and they searched for the king everywhere, but they couldn't find the king. Just as an inexperienced yogi searches for the hidden Paramatma but is unsuccessful, similarly the citizens were unsuccessful in their attempt to search for Anga Maharaj. And then they all became disappointed. They returned to the city. And then with the tears in their eyes, they offered obeisances and informed the sages in full detail about how they were unable to find Anga. So with this, the chapter ends. So before we go to the next chapter, any other questions? Let's start the next chapter. The story of King Vena. We have a question?
You were explaining about that prasad is when we are able to see the situations as the mercy of the Lord. And you were mentioning that so when the bhoga mentality is there, so then what you said with it, I just wanted to.
Yeah, bhoga mentality is that when we think that so why this difficult situation is happening to me? Like I didn't do any mistake, or I have been pious, but why maybe I have been punished more? Why such a difficult thing is coming to me? When we are brooding over it, when we have a grudge, it can be different situations. It could be some health crisis or somebody like you are expecting certain facility or position, you are not getting that, or you are punished more than that, or some family crisis. So at that time, yeah, on a practical level, we put our effort to deal with the situation. But in our mind, if we are thinking, why such a thing is happening to me, such a good person like me? So that means there's a sign of a boga mentality. Boga mentality means wanting to enjoy before being offered to the Lord. Like when wanting to enjoy the food, to think that I am the enjoyer. When we think I am the enjoyer, then we think we want to enjoy the food before being offered to the Lord. That is a boga mentality. That boga mentality is not only with respect to the foodstuffs, but when we see the life situations in this way, that's a sign of a boga mentality.
So it's like prasad means like coming from Krishna. And when we see that as a Krishna's help to become closer to him. So
Huh.
that way it is like we are seeing the connection, and that's how it is prasad coming from the Lord.
Yeah, when we see even the difficult situation as an opportunity to come close to Krishna, maybe I deserve much worse than this, or maybe Krishna has given the situation so that I can intensify this, my taking shelter of Krishna. That is a sign of seeing the situation as a mercy of the Lord.
And Pradesh Vairagya he told that I couldn't catch, like Shamshan Vairagya he told, Prasav Vairagya, and two more you said.
Abhava Vairagya. Abhava means absence. Absence, like when you are unable to achieve something, then sometimes people they speak some words of detachment. But the moment the next opportunity comes to achieve that, then the detachment goes away.
And that stable one, what the name of that?
Stable vaira is no name as such. That these are the three types of temporary vairagya. Stable vairagya is a deep sense of detachment. I didn't mention any
So
Sanskrit
there is
name.
no Sanskrit name.
There were two roles that he had. One was of the king and the father. So, to become detached from reforming the child, to be detached from the situation that that I cannot change this person, and maybe it will help me to feel detached from family life, is one thing. But then, how, like his role as a king also he abandoned. So was that not seen like the citizens became practically shelterless?
Yeah, in the sense,
He could have married also. There were situations where person marries another or another child can be begotten from the same wife, and then he can be put as the king. There can be so many other thought processes to the same situation, which may not be detachment from kingship, but detachment from the family situation of reforming this child.
see, when the call of God comes, like all this logic will not apply to us actually. You cannot. These are logical questions. Like he could have continued to be the king, or he could have maybe married again to get another son or something like that. But he got a deep call of God, deep urgency from within. So when such a call of God comes, many times, just like when we say love is blind, we can see positive way, negative way. And at that time, when a person is blinded by certain, say, call of love, then none of the logic will actually apply. He will not be able to understand any logic. Like Anga Maharaj, he got a deep sense of calling of Krishna. He wanted to just detach himself and go to the forest and take shelter of the Lord. So that's how we can understand. And Anga Maharaj also, it seems that like he got a child at a very later age, it looks like. Like he didn't have a son for a long time, and not specifically mentioned long time, but he didn't have a son, and then later he got a son. Maybe he is also old also, it looks like that. But more than that, I would say that he developed a deep sense of detachment, deep calling of God.
So, Prajay, another thing was in the Vedic times was that what was it called? Primogenitor, that principle of putting the eldest son as the king. w- is it applicable even if like some person is not of good quality? So can he not find a citizen of a able quality and then put him on the role, because he left, practically left. It's like the king is not there now, and then Veena is the only default king, and Veena is the gone case fellow. So, so is it not in the control of Veena? Oh, sorry, Anga, to leave, but put another person proper. Another means the best person among the Andhe mein Kana bhi theek hai. Veena was gone case, so he could have found at least a noble person among them.
Yeah, Bharat Maharaj also had 9 sons, but when he saw that none of his sons were qualified, therefore it is described that he appointed some other suitable person as the king. Whom he appointed, I don't know the detail. I couldn't read in the Mahabharata. Yeah, definitely that point is there. You can appoint some other qualified person. Generally, people prefer from the royal dynasty, just like even in the current times, people prefer a particular brand of cloth, particular brand of shoe. Many brand value is there. Like I was seeing a video. That video was saying that there are some 7 or 9 brands in India. They appear as if like it is that brands are from abroad, but actually they are Indian companies. Some Peter England and some other names they were mentioning. But actually they are Indian companies, but they gave that particular brand to attract. So people prefer from the royal dynasty because that is like a brand value. But yeah, this principle is there when you see, because at that time previously, when the samskaras were performed, maintained properly, usually, like usually means majority, 99% of the time, people from Brahman families will be Brahmanas, Kshatriya families will be Kshatriyas. It will be like something very, very rare where a Varna, somebody from Kshatriya will be born in a Brahman family, or a Vaishya will be in the Brahman family. Such instances would be like extremely rare. So it may be easy to say, look, maybe he could have found some other citizen, but whether that was possible, that was another thing actually. Yeah, one thing, like he could have told us people that, okay, you could have consulted the ministers, okay, I don't want to appoint Vena as the king, whom to appoint. It seems, it appears like Anga Maharaj had practically exhausted everything. Bhagavatam sometimes it doesn't go into the details of the entire story. Bhagavatam just mentions briefly. So maybe Anga Maharaj exhausted all the options, and then he felt that maybe the only option is he just wanted to go to the forest. It looks like that.
Even in the Vedic times, there was the Samrat and then the kings. There were so many kings. So there is Kshatriya dynasty. It's not like he is alone the owner of the entire Kshatriya wing. So there is so many Kshatriyas, and then he can see that if there is a able king in another Rajya and he is just the Samrat over him, he can put him and rule the larger world. But I'm just sharing that nothing of that happened. So it becomes a very chaotic situation actually. Whenever we see in any situation of leadership also, the leader gets just, he leaves, then it's more difficult to handle than appoint someone. It'll something he's able to do. So anyway,
Yeah, one thing we find in the Bhagavatam, like Bhagavatam chooses to focus on those aspects of the story. These are definitely valid questions. Generally, Bhagavatam focuses on those aspects of the story which in which a person's that devotional consciousness is focused. So that's why we are not able to know the other details of the story. It could be in some other Puranas if it is there. Like sometimes other Puranas, they also focus on, they may choose to focus on other aspects of the story. But definitely valid points actually. Maitreya uvacha Brigvadayaste munayo Lokanam kshema darshinah Goptaryasati vaindranam Pashyanta pashu samyatam.
The great sage Maitreya continued, O great hero Vidura, the great sages headed by Bhrigu were always thinking of the welfare of the people in general. When they saw that in the absence of King Anga, there was no one to protect the interests of the people, they understood that without a ruler, the people would become independent and non regulated.
So here the sages actually they saw that in the absence of the king, the people were behaving like animals. That means they were not following any rules and regulations. So they were called as Kshema Darshinaha. So the word Kshema Darshinaha, it refers to those who are always looking after the welfare of the people in general. So even in the Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam, Prabhupada says that in the material world, everybody is envious of everyone else, and therefore there is competition. But the transcendental devotees of the Lord are not only free from material envy, but are well-wishers to everyone, and they strive to establish a competition-less society with God in the center. So all the citizens became unruly in the absence of the king. So like in just like in a suppose in a city which is not having education department and the police department, you will find a city lot of crimes in the city. People are neither educated about the good values, nor the people are punished when they do some mistakes. So therefore, a kingdom is considered dead when there is no proper governance. Arajakata. So then the Brahmanas actually called for the Sunita, and then with her permission, they installed Vena on the throne, although the ministers disagreed with this. And the ministers were not agreeing to the proposal, but still, like the Brahmanas, they appointed Vena, hoping that maybe he would change. So there is a, if you see, leader and a manager, there are two psychologies. Like a leader is one who sees everybody in the society as having something to contribute, and he empowers more and more people and controls less. And a manager, on the other hand, sees everybody as having some shortcoming, and therefore sees people as making some mistakes. So it's not that like one is superior or inferior, not just two kinds of psychologies, and both are required in different areas of service. The manager is more control centric and he may be less empowering. A leader has a natural trust in the people, and he has to cultivate to find mistakes in his followers. And a manager, on the other hand, has a critical mindset, and therefore he struggles to trust people. So, but when a leader and a manager, when they work as a team, then they can tremendously benefit the organization. And on the other hand, when the leader and a manager, when they don't work as a team, then it can create a disastrous effect. So suppose only when the managers are there and the leaders are not there, or when the leaders are there and the managers are not there. Some people, they easily put trust on the people, but the trust can be exploited by the other people. Some people, their manager is more efficiency centric. So this task should be done. they may not be able to easily empower the people, and that may be suffocating certain people. So both have to work as a team actually. So if we see this Brahmana's role, the Brahmanas, they sort of put trust in Vena, maybe Vena will function properly. But the other ministers, they were not agreeing. Said, oh, this Vena is not the right person to become the king. So yeah, the decision turned out to be wrong. But of course, the Brahmanas took responsibility for the decision and then they corrected the decision. So sometimes one can make mistake in the decision, but a responsible person takes responsibility for that mistake in the decision, and then he doesn't like just escape from the situation. He tries to correct the mistake and then tries to see like how the situation can be corrected. So that is what we see in these Brahmanas, the dynasty of Bhrigumuni. They appointed Vena as the king. It turned out to be a wrong decision. And also it is said that a blind uncle is better than no uncle. There was no king. But instead of that, they thought that let us at least appoint a king, although Vena maybe has many faults. Maybe having a king is better than not having a king. So they appointed Vena. But what happened later? So like when we talk about leader and manager, a good leader should also develop the flavor of a manager, and a good manager should also develop the flavor of a leader. It's like leadership quality and also some kind of so some flavor of a man. Both flavors are there, then it will help. Like for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna encouraged Arjuna, Daivi Sampat Vimokshaya Nibandaya Surimata Mashucha Sampadam Devim Abhijatosi Bandava. Krishna encouraged Arjuna. That is like a quality of a leader, encouraging, appreciating. At the same time, Krishna also chastised Arjuna. Ashocha Nanvashochastva Prajna Vadam Chabhashase. So Krishna had both these actually aspects: critical thinking and all, disciplining, and also encouraging Arjuna. So here, when they appointed Vena as the king, so Vena was very severe and cruel, and like many, the smaller thieves and rogues, they became afraid of Vena because Vena was very cruel, and all the smaller thieves, they all practically disappeared. They started hiding in different places. But Vena, he became all powerful with 8 kinds of opulences. 8 kinds of opulences means the acharyas say that opulences coming from 8 directions, or he became proud because of the 8 powers, possessing wealth from the 8 directions. And then Vena considered himself worthy of worship. Like Vena forgot that he is simply the pratinidhi, the representative of the Supreme Lord. Rather, he considered himself to be like the Supreme Lord, and therefore he started stabda sambhavita swata. He started disrespecting the exalted people. So when a person becomes proud, that pride leads to disrespect. So Vena started disrespecting, and he traveled on his chariot around the earth, causing the earth and the sky to tremble. So bhakti, as I mentioned, that bhakti is the art of transformation, transforming material into spiritual. So the most transformative quality on the positive side, that which will transform material to spiritual, is humility. And the most transformative quality on the negative side, that which will transform spiritual to material, is pride. Both of them transform, but they transform in the opposite ways. So here Vena, he started actually disrespecting the great souls. And then he made an open order. Na yashtavyam, na datavyam, na hotavyam dvija kvachit. Iti nyavarayat dharmam beri goshena sarvashaha. No more sacrifice, no more charity, and no more oblations. And he stopped the performance of dharma beri goshena sarvashaha, with the sound of drums everywhere. So it was like a, recently we were discussing some other meeting in context to this, in this particular section. So here in this episode, Vena was he clearly, in an unambiguous way, he deviated from the principles of dharma. He made a very open order, no more sacrifices, no more pious activities. But even then, although it was like an unadulterated 100% deviation, but even then, the Brahmanas chose to first have a dialogue with Vena. And then they came to the last decision of killing Vena. So, but they could have, they didn't immediately do that, okay, this person has deviated, let us just kill him immediately. And they first wanted to give a chance to Vena, they first wanted to have a dialogue with Vena. This is the Brahminical like method, like Brahminical style of management or Brahminical style of dealing with the things. They don't, initially itself, they don't want to take the action of, let us just immediately remove him like that. First, they first wanted to have a dialogue with Vena. And we will see that. So all the sages, Venasya avekshya munayo durvrittasya vicheshtitam vimrushya loka vyasanam kripayochusma satrinaha. So all the sages, they were assembled together, and after observing cruel Vena's activities, they concluded that a great danger and catastrophe was approaching the people in the world. Thus, out of compassion, they began to talk amongst themselves, for they themselves were the performers of the sacrifices. So they were actually very angry with Vena, but still they suppressed their anger. They first wanted to have a dialogue. And their own sacrifices were stopped. The very people who appointed Vena, their own sacrifices were stopped. So here Prabhupada says that saintly persons are not unconcerned with the people's welfare. So karmis are, they are absorbed in sense gratification, and the jnanis are completely aloof from the society. But the devotees are, they are anxious to see the people, how the people can be made happy both materially and spiritually. There is an integral welfare. Therefore, they began to consult one another how to get out of the dangerous atmosphere. So sometimes we see, we may tend to have a little develop a jnani's attitude of being aloof from the society. Yesterday, one devotee was saying that like this Kashmir Files movie has come, and then now there is a talk everywhere about the Kashmir Files. There is a Hindu fervor is coming up everywhere. But we are supposed to be simply be absorbed and aloof from the world, like that said. I told that I have a different take. I told that, yeah, we have to be spiritually absorbed, but at the same time, we have to be aware of the situation in the world. We have to be politically alert. we have to be culturally accommodating the people from different backgrounds. And we have to be socially sensitive. Like for example, suppose a kitchen in charge is there, and suppose in the city there are so much of some problem in the distribution of the food grain. There are so much of suppose lot of quarrel, and this thing is happening in the city. There is supply of the food grains are not happening, and suddenly one day it happens to that the kitchen, all the ingredients are empty, and the city, everything is, all the shops are closed. And then the people ask the kitchen in charge, why did you not store all the food grains before? The kitchen in charge says that, see, I do my 64 rounds every day. I couldn't get time to find information about what is happening in the city. So then, yeah, we are supposed to be absorbed in our sadhana, but at the same time, we have to be aware of what is happening in the world. We cannot be completely aloof, actually. So, the same way that it is not that these Muslims, they won't attack the devotees. There are instances in Sri Rangam, 12,000 Vaishnavas were slaughtered. Ranganath deity was moved from Sri Rangam practically for, I think, 50 years or 60 years. Ranganath was worshipped somewhere else. So there is always a danger from the unruly elements. One has to be aware of that. And a devotee should think about how to protect the temple, how to protect the community. One should be aware of these things. One cannot be completely aloof. Being completely aloof, that is like the jnani's tendency. Just like, suppose for the temple to run, we need a different basic, we collect donation from different people. It is not that people who give donation to the temple, all of them have the pure devotional service as an aspiration. We have different schemes. Many pious people, they must be supporting the temple, say some prasadam sponsorship or some different other schemes. We come up with the schemes to attract people. For many pious people who may not be pure devotees, they may be many worshipping devatas, Krishna, all indiscriminately, but they have some pious attitude. Nuances. For the temple to run, we take help not just from those who are following the path of pure bhakti or who have the aspiration of pure bhakti are small, but majority of the donation must be coming from the common pious people, I think. So similarly, when we talk about the physical protection of the temple and the community, we have to take help from people who may not be like devotees of Krishna. There may be general Hindu groups and who have a soft corner for the Sanatan Dharma. So we need to have a cordial relation with them. If you are all the time attacking them, oh, you are simply nationalists or this thing, they will not. For common materialistic pious people, if you all the time attack them, oh, you are all not practicing pure devotional service, or then they will not be encouraged to give any donation to maintain the temple. Rather, we encourage them with whatever mindset they have to somehow encourage them in the service of Krishna. So similarly, for the physical protection of the temple and community, we need to have the good relation with the other, say, Hindu groups or those who are Sanatan Dharma friendly, to have for the protection of the people. So the point is that we cannot be completely aloof from what is happening in the society. That is like the jnani's tendency. Or devotee can have the tendency, provided he is living in some, like in Himalayas, in some caves, where he is completely cut off from the society. But when we are in the society, we have to be politically alert. We have to be socially sensitive and culturally accommodative. At the same time, increase our absorption in devotional service. So here these Brahmanas, they they wanted to do something. What can we do to actually again revive all the dharmic activities? And what they are going to do, we'll see that. We'll take 5 minutes break and then we'll continue.
Due to an irresponsible king on one side and thieves and rogues on the other side.
So then, so they saw that the citizens were actually in a dangerous situation from the both ends. On one side there were the thieves were there, another side King Vena was there. So then, the fearing a state without a king, they had made Vena as the king, although he was not qualified. But now there is fear from Vena only. Then how can the people be made happy now currently? So here again Prabhupada says that like Vena had given a clear order, na yashtavyam, na datavyam, na hotavyam. But Krishna says that yajnadana tapakarma na tyajyam karyameva tat yajnodana tapaschaiva pavanani manishina. They should never be given up, yajna, dana and tapa. They purify even the purified souls, great souls. But all these activities were stopped by Vena. When the sages and saintly persons saw that Vena had stopped all these functions, they became concerned about the people's progress. Saintly people preach God consciousness, Krishna consciousness, because they are anxious to save the general populace. There must be a good government to see that the citizens are actually executing the religious rituals, and thieves and rogues must be curbed. When this is done, people can advance peacefully in spiritual consciousness and make their lives successful. So there is a need of a good government. And then they are thinking that because he is born from the womb of Sunita, Vena is by nature very mischievous. Because Sunita was the daughter of the Amsha of Adharma. But supporting this mischievous king is exactly like maintaining a snake with a milk. Now he has become a source of all the difficulties. So, like when you have appointed somebody, and the person who is appointed, if he commits certain mistakes, the person who appointed also gets the share of the reaction. Like there is a very clear verse where Prithu Maharaj is saying, when he is actually speaking to the assembled people, he says that Yuyam tad anumodadvam pitru devarishayo malaha kartush hastur anugnatus tulyam yat pretya tatpalam. When Prithu Maharaj was speaking in the assembly, he said that I request all the pure-hearted devatas, forefathers and saintly persons to support my proposal, because after the death, the result of an action is equally shared by the doer of the action, director of the action, and the supporter of the action. The Brahmanas are thinking that we have appointed Vena, and therefore if we continue to support this mischievous king Vena, it is like maintaining a snake with a milk. And now the Vena has become the enemy of the citizens. Despite all these discrepancies, we should at once try to pacify him. By doing so, we may not be touched by the sinful results caused by him. So therefore, they try to first, like Sama, Dama, Danda, Beda, first they are trying to pacify. They are coming to the Danda is the last resort. Like suppose you appointed certain committee for some particular purpose. If the committee, you perceive that it is going in some wrong direction, then first thing is that like you first talk to the people. This was the purpose of the committee. and you are decisions you have implemented these decisions, maybe 3-4 decisions, and these 3 decisions are not satisfying the purpose with which the committee was established because of these reasons. And can you give an explanation for these decisions, why you are going away from this purpose? And then when you see, depending on the response, then you take a further course of action, whether they accept the mistakes, whether they try to rectify the decisions. And then when you don't find this one, then you say, okay, we are going to dismantle the committees. That is the last result. But suppose suddenly one fine day we come and say that, oh, this committee is dissolved. And the person was, some people have put their energy and time and energy, so many hours to actually do certain service. There could be some mistakes or something, but they have put their heart and soul with a good intention. And suddenly somebody comes, oh, the committee is dissolved. But generally, when a person has put on heart and soul in a particular direction, and then they feel suddenly this service is removed, they become disappointed actually. Like, I was talking with one devotee, he had literally put so many hours in a particular service, really selflessly, keeping aside his personal preaching and putting lot of energy to improve different systems. And suddenly they made an announcement, the committee itself is dissolved actually. So then that devotee was saying that I was literally taken aback with the decision. I was thinking what should I do? I suddenly became a jobless only actually. These thoughts come into my mind. Should I take up some job outside or something? So it took some time for him to come out of that. So then I was thinking that when we have to dissolve certain committee, when you perceive that, okay, the committee is going in the wrong direction, first thing is that we try to discuss with the people that because of this thing, it is going in the wrong direction. Can you rectify it? And then we can take this one. But here, in the case of Vena, there was no gray area. He had clearly deviated. He stopped. Suppose you appoint some certain committee. Suppose they say that no more chanting of 16 rounds, no more Mangalarti. Then there's no, you don't have any doubt that this person has deviated or not. In one sense, Vena had made that kind of orders. No more chanting Hare Krishna, no more Mangalarti, no more worship in the temple. All the temples are closed. Then even in such a gross deviation, the Brahmanas first chose to have a dialogue with Vena. So you can imagine what kind of a patience they had actually. They wanted to give some chance to Vena to get corrected. So then they made otherwise generally sometimes Kshatriya type of management or Kshatriya or whatever other management is you don't have a discussion and suddenly you pass an order, oh, everything is dissolved actually. But here the Brahmanas, they first chose to have a dialogue. Even to such a cruel king like Vena, they wanted to give some chance. So then they speak 10 verses actually. Ultimately, King Vena became. So the law of karma prohibits a person even to associate with a mischievous individual. By electing Vena to the throne, the saintly sages certainly associated with him. So therefore, it is also important. Of course, we have a democracy system, but in democracy also, when we put a vote, we are electing somebody actually. Or when you don't put a vote, you are taking a neutral side, but you are responsible for the decision actually. Usually, Many times in the neutral side, we tend to favor the wrong people. And when you deliberately choose the wrong person, then you also get implicated in the wrong decisions committed by the person whom you have elected. So therefore, before taking any action against him, the sages tried to pacify and correct him so that he might turn from his mischief. So the saintly sages continued thinking, of course, we are completely aware of his mischievous nature, yet nevertheless we enthroned Vena. If we cannot persuade King Vena to accept our advice, then he'll be condemned by the public and we will join them. And thus by our prowess we shall burn him to ashes. So they had that in mind, but here we see, here is an instance. Generally, the sages are not interested in the political affairs. They are interested in the welfare of the people in general. So therefore, they sometimes have to come down to the political field and take steps to correct the misguided government or royalty. Yeah, there is a there is a concept of apat dharma. These sages, they killed King Vena. That was normally the Brahmanas should never kill somebody. And what to speak of a person like a king. But as an emergency, as the last resort, for the sake of the greater welfare of the whole kingdom, they killed King Vena. Before that, we will see the instructions. But the apat dharma, the principle of apat dharma is that apat dharma should be done only in the case of emergency. Otherwise, it can become an adharma. And sometimes saintly sages having to come down to the political field and take steps to correct the misguided government or royalty. Something like we say sometimes the Uttamadhikari comes down to the Madhyamadhikari platform for the sake of preaching, we say. So here the Brahmanas, they are little coming to the political field to take the steps necessary. So one has to be careful. When we become callous to the, suppose in front of our eyes, lot of adharma is happening and you simply remain callous, then also you get implicated. But when you don't do anything which is happening right in front of your eyes, then you get implicated in that. At the same time, when you become too much involved in the nitty-gritties of the situation, then you can get carried away from your normal sadhana, normal duties. So one needs to have that balance actually. So here the sages, they decided to do something. The Brahmanas do not even have the power to perform sacrifices in which the animals are put into a fire to attain a new life, because they were not able to perform even their basic sadhana of the performing the sacrifices. So they had to do not only for them, for the whole world, common people. Under these circumstances, instead of actively taking part in politics, saintly person should engage in chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. By the grace of Lord Chaitanya, by simply chanting the mantra, the general populace can derive all benefits. So we see Prabhupada different purports in this section. Some places he says that we will not take active part in politics, he says. Some places he says that when you are aloof, then we also get implicated. Prabhupada, once he encouraged his devotees to start a political party. In God we trust. Like that is, he told. I think Balavan Prabhu or some. Some places Prabhupada said that even the politics can be Krishna consciousness should be all pervading. It should enter all the fields. Krishna consciousness should spread in all the fields, including politics, social service, like that he mentioned. So, so then the Brahmanas, they approached Vena. So concealing the real anger, they tried to pacify him with the sweet words. So Munaya Vuchuhu. Nripavarya nibotai dat yatte vigyapayama bho Ayushri Balakirtinam Tavatata Vivardhanam. Henry, translation.
The great sage said, Dear king, we have come to give you good advice. Kindly hear us with great attention. By doing so, your duration of life and your opulence, strength, and reputation will increase.
So we see that the Brahmanas were angry, but they had to conceal their anger. Like Vasudeva, when he was speaking to Kamsa, his mind was filled with anxiety within. When Devaki was about to be killed by Kamsa, his mind was filled with anxiety. But externally, he spoke smilingly to Kamsa. Prasanna Vadanam Bojo Nishamsam Nirapatrapam. Vasudeva Manasa Duyamanena Vihasan Idam Abravit. Externally, he smiled, although internally his mind was filled with anxiety. So, material world, there will be many situations where we have to act diplomatically. When we are dealing with especially crooked people, sometimes we have to act. Diplomacy is unavoidable. Although diplomacy should be avoided within the community of devotees, we have to avoid diplomacy because diplomacy is one of the weed. Kutinati, Nishiddachara, Jiva Hamsana. Kutinati is one of the weed. It should be avoided within the community of devotees. Or even if you are diplomatic within the community of devotees, diplomacy should be used only for the purpose of bringing another devotee close to Krishna, bringing another devotee close to the Guru, just like Ramananda Rai would speak diplomatically to Lord Chaitanya for what purpose? To bring Prataprudra Maharaj close to Mahaprabhu. Otherwise, when we are diplomatic within the community of devotees, it creates a distrust actually. So here the Brahmanas, they had to conceal their anger. They said that, please understand what we will reveal to you. And if you follow what we say, you will have increase of life, wealth, strength and fame. Ayushri Bala Kirtinam Tava Tata Vivardhanam. Then they say, Prabhupada says that if the citizens want to be happy and prosperous in the democratic age, they should not elect rascals and fools who have no respect for saintly persons. The great kings were very responsible in taking the instructions given by the saintly person. Kings used to accept the instructions given by the great sages. Dharma acharita pumsam vanmana kaya buddhibihi lokan vishokan vitarat atanantyam asanginam. Henry.
Those who live according to religious principles and who follow them by words, mind, body, and intelligence are elevated to the heavenly kingdom, which is devoid of all miseries. Being thus rid of the material influence, they achieve unlimited happiness in life.
So when the men perform dharma by the words, mind, body, and intelligence, the whole world becomes free of misery. And for those without attachment, there is liberation. So when people perform dharmic activities, even with some material desires, then because of following dharma, they become free of misery. And when they perform dharma in the mood of Nishkam Karma Yoga, then they attain liberation. So they are instructing the importance of following dharma. But you have actually stopped all the dharmic activities. So Prabhupada says that one should not simply make a show of religious life, but should perform devotional service perfectly with words, mind, body, and good intelligence. That's a very interesting shloka in the Yaksha Prashna. Very beautiful shloka in the form of a riddle, actually. Yaksha is asking a question. 1 minute. It's asking that Indriyarthan Anubhavan Indriyarthan Indriyarthan Anubhavan Buddhiman Loka Pujitah Sammata Sarvabhutanam Uchvasan Kona Jivati. So he is asking, like, who is that person who is Indriyarthan? He is enjoying the objects of the senses perfectly. His senses are working perfectly. He is eating good food. He's able to smell everything properly. He's able to hear properly. All the senses are working properly. And Buddhiman, he is also highly intelligent. IQ 140, 150. Loka Pujitah, respected by the whole world. And Sammata Sarva Bhutanam, accepted by all living entities. Uchvasan, he is also breathing properly. His breathing is very properly is breathing. But still Kona Jivati, but he is considered to be a dead man. It's like a riddle question actually. If somebody is, all the senses are working properly, he's breathing properly, and he is highly intelligent, respected by the whole world, accepted by all living entities, but he is still considered to be a dead man. Who is such a person? So Yudhishthira answers, he says that Devata Atiti Brityanam Pitrunam Atmanashchaya Na Nirvapati Panchanam Uchasvasanna Jivati. Essentially, Yaksha is asking that who is the living dead person? All those 5 characteristics are characteristics of a living person, not only living physically, but also highly intelligent, respected by the world. But still he is considered to be dead. Who is such a person? So Yudhishthira says that one who does not perform sacrifices to the Devatas, because we get different facilities from the Devatas, we are supposed to repay to the Devatas. One who does not propitiate by offerings the Devatas, the guests, the dependents, the Pitrus, and one's own self. Essentially, he's talking about the Pancha Mahayagya. Pancha Mahayagya is towards the Devatas, towards the Pitrus, to the guests who come to our house, and to the dependents under us, and our satisfy the soul, that is our own spiritual progress. One who does not perform this Pancha Mahayagya, then although he is breathing, although he may be intelligent, although he may be respected by the world, but he is considered to be a dead man. So in the case of Vena, he had stopped all these Pancha Mahayagya. He stopped all the Shraddha, all the Yajnas to the Devatas. Like anything religious, he stopped actually. So when he performed religious activities, even with a material motivation, there will be peace in the world. And then with detachment, when a person performs, one attains liberation. So the instructions given herein serve as a summary of how the head of the government should execute his ruling power and thus attain happiness. And then they say that Sate ma vinashed vira prajanam kshema lakshanah yasmin vinashte nripatir aishwaryat avarohati. Do not destroy dharma, which kshema lakshana, which brings benefit to the citizens. If dharma is destroyed, the king will fall from his position. So if we see the last, when Lord Ram was going to the forest, what was the instruction which Kaushalya gave to Lord Ram? Kaushalya said that please, at any cost, you follow dharma, and dharma will protect you in any situation. what was the question? What was the underlying question of the Bhagavad Gita? Karpanya dosho pahata swabhava prichamitvam dharma sammuda cheta. Dharma sammuda, the confusion about what is the dharma, that is the underlying basis of the whole Bhagavad Gita to start. In the Mahabharata, in the Asat Sabha, what was the question which Draupadi asked? What is my dharma in this situation of my life? So you see this question, and even in the Bhagavatam, what is the question which Parishit Maharaj asked? A person who is about to die and a person in all circumstances, what a person should do, what a person should not do. It's also about dharma. What is one's dharma and what is what one should avoid, what is the adharma one should avoid. So here also is saying that if you destroy dharma, then the king will fall from his position. So we see so many scriptures, some of the fundamental questions which drive the conversation or the instructions ahead is the questions about dharma. And then they say that Rajan asadu amatyebhyas choradibhya prajanrupa rakshanyata balim grishnan iha pretyacha modate. So the king protects the citizens from the thieves and the corrupt ministers. Rajan asadu amatyebhya, and accepts taxes accordingly. So this point will come repeatedly. He's saying that one of the duty of the king is to protect the citizens from the thieves and also from the corrupt ministers. When he does that, then he enjoys in this world and the next world. So sometimes it's easy to give protection from the thieves, but it's more difficult to give protection from the corrupt ministers. That's a more difficult thing here. In any government, many times the corrupt ministers, to remove them from the post, that is more difficult. Even if you see in the Krishna Leela, Krishna had protected the Vrajavasis from the demons like Bakasur, Agasur, Trinavarta. But Krishna also had to protect the Vrajavasis from persons like Indra. That is actually more difficult. So, the example of the so here Prabhupada writes a detailed purport. Formerly, ministers were appointed by the king and were not elected. Consequently, if the king was not very pious or strict, the ministers would become thieves and rogues and exploit the innocent citizens. If you read the conversation in the Bharat Milap, Bharat Milap is a highly the episode in which deep emotions are involved. Many times the dramas are enacted on Bharat Milap, like people start crying. But the same Bharat Milap, you see there is a detailed section in which Ram is instructing Bharat Maharaj about the principles of governance. And then he talks about, have you chosen the ministers like this? He talks about what kind of ministers should be there. Are you paying salary to the different servants in the right time? Are you maintaining them properly? So even in the midst of the deep spiritual emotions, he's talking about very practical things of the responsibility of a king. So generally, sometimes in discharging the responsibilities, sometimes we become desensitive to the emotions of the people, or sometimes in being emotionally connecting with the people, we forget our responsibilities. Here, Lord Ram is speaking in detail about the responsibilities. When Narada Muni, when he comes to meet Yudhishthira Maharaj, he also speaks different things about like what kind of ministers you have. Are you having the ministers with these qualities? Like that, many questions he asked. So here also Prabhupada talks about the importance of the right ministers. If the king cannot give protection to the citizens from the thieves and rogues, then he has no right to exact taxes from them. And then, yeah, in the 12th canto, it described that those proud Malechas representing themselves as the kings will tyrannize their subjects, and their subjects, on the other hand, will cultivate the most vicious practices. So the kings in the Kali Yuga, that is described in the 12th canto. Thus, practicing the evil habits and behaving foolishly, the subjects will be like the rulers. And further, it's explained that in the previous age, the general populace was not so degraded, and the head of the government was never elected. The king was the supreme executive personality, and if he caught any minister stealing like thieves and rogues, he would at once have them killed or dismissed them from service. It was the duty of the king to kill the thieves and rogues. It was similarly his duty to immediately kill the dishonest ministers in government service. So these things are very tough decisions. So that is why, like for a common person who is running a simple family, like for him, the family responsibilities become more important than even his work in the office. But for a person who is having a responsibility as a king, his responsibility as a king becomes much more important than his relationship with his friends or ministers or with his own family members. So therefore, for a king, one of the most important qualities is that he should be loyal to the principles of dharma. That means if his own friend or if his own son is deviating from the principles of dharma, he should be ready to punish that person. And if the son of the enemy is found to be following the principles of dharma, he should be ready to reward that person. So that is the quality expected from a king, actually. So by such a strict vigilance, the king could run the government very well, and the citizens would be happy to have such a king. So unless a king is perfectly able to give protection to the citizens from the rogues and thieves, he has no right to levy taxes from the citizens for his own sense gratification. However, if he gives all protection to the citizens and levies taxes on them, he can live very happily and peacefully in this life, and at the end of this life, be elevated to the heavenly kingdom or even to the Vaikunthas. So then further instruction we will see tomorrow, and I will complete this chapter tomorrow. Anybody has any questions or comments? Any comments? रंतरा श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय, गौर भक्त वृंद की जय।